Hello, ladies, ambies, and gents. This is my review of Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Warning, this review contains spoilers, so if you've not seen it yet, come back and watch this review when you have. Overall, I enjoyed the movie. I can already see how it will divide the fans, whereas the prequels were heavily criticised for allegedly not being similar enough to the original trilogy. The Force Awakens will be heavily criticised for the opposite reason, i.e. being too similar. This isn't entirely without justification. We have a lot of reused ideas here, the plucky young potential Jedi living on a desert planet, important information hidden inside a droid that everyone's trying to get hold of, some massive super weapon that needs to be blown up, scary villain in a mask who used to be a good person before being seduced by the dark side, Jedi Master gone into hiding after the fall of his academy. However, we also have a few new ideas. A stormtrooper who has an epiphany and decides to defect and help the good guys. Han Solo having lost the Millennium Falcon to some criminal or other, a properly strong female character. Finn was an interesting character as he gave us an insight into what stormtroopers actually are. I've always been a bit vague about this. Are they clones? Are they just regular soldiers who we never see removing their helmets? The notion of them being brainwashed into being soldiers from childhood is very sinister. The reintroduction of Han Solo and Chewbacca was brilliant, and I don't think the movie would have been quite as good without them. A lot of post-Return of the Jedi expanded universe books depict Han as continuing to be a general in the New Republic. However, The Force Awakens take things in the opposite direction and has Han returning to his old ways as a smuggler. The original Star Wars trilogy never offered as much in the way of strong female characters. We had Princess Leia, who, to be fair, got to zap bad guys with ray guns and stuff, but never got to fly a spaceship. Notably, all the fighter pilots in all three original movies were men. The only other character we had was Mon Mothma, leader of the Rebel Alliance, and her contribution to the Star Wars saga was limited to one speech. By contrast, Rey is our main character in The Force Awakens, scavenger, mechanic, pilot, and potential Jedi to boot. She's attractive but not sexualised with skimpy outfits or male gaze shots. Her fight scenes are actual fights, not excuses to gawp at her body from a variety of angles. While she does need rescuing at one point, she doesn't need quite as much rescuing as Finn first thinks, and is able to figure out the Jedi mind trick of her own initiative. You could argue that she's a bit too endowed with all these skills, but then so was Luke Skywalker, who is presumably to be her tutor in the next movie, much like Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. One thing I noticed that may only be of interest to serious geeks was X-Wing fighters with blue markings. Why is this significant? Well, in the original script for Star Wars Episode 4, the squadron that led the assault on the Death Star were called Blue Squadron, and Luke's call sign was Blue 5. In the novelisation of the movie, this is still the case. So why do we get to end up changing it to Red Squadron? Well, it has to do with the blue screens that were being used to do the backgrounds for the space scenes. If you have blue markings on your spaceships, then you end up with bits of outer space being overlaid onto them. Obviously, technology has moved on in the years since, so we now get to have X-Wings with blue markers. So, hooray. Another thing I liked was the choice of locations. The Force Awakens takes us to Abu Dhabi, Iceland, and Ireland, which is where Luke Skywalker is revealed to be hiding. This is a particularly nice choice of scenery, I thought. My thoughts on Starkiller Base: is it just a vamped up and repackaged Death Star? Probably yes, but they even preemptively address this accusation in the movie itself, showing us the clear difference between the Death Star and Starkiller Base. Mainly that it's bigger, built inside a planet, and can blow even more shit up. Not that much of a difference, but still a difference. Weapons that can destroy planets are one of the more ridiculous things we see in science fiction movies, in my opinion. My main gripes with the concept are: 1. If such technology is plausible, then every superpower in the galaxy will be using it, or at least threatening to use it. Surely, therefore, there'd be some sort of mutually assured destruction stalemate in place. 2. Destroying planets would use up a huge amount of energy and would be rather pointless if all you're trying to do is kill the people living on the surface. This can already be achieved with our comparatively primitive nuclear weapons, leaving a dead planet. Obliterating the planet in its entirety seems like overkill. Another bugbear I have with science fiction movies is aeroplanes in space, and I hold Star Wars particularly accountable for this because by basing the assault on the first Death Star on the Dam Busters, they essentially set this whole ball rolling. As such, the original Battlestar Galactica, Glenn A. Larson's version of Buck Rogers in the 25th century, Starcom, Galaxy Rangers, etc., all featured space battles with spacecraft swooping around like aircraft in an atmosphere. One of the first shows I remember that went against this grain was Babylon 5, with its star furies that were obedient to Newtonian physics, but that's perhaps a subject for another video. The reason I bring it up here is because, much like the Battle of Hoth featured in The Empire Strikes Back, the assault on Starkiller Base takes place inside an atmosphere, and as such the Dam Busters style attack runs are a lot easier to digest. I think science fiction movie directors should take note of this, and if they insist on having a dogfight in their movie, which, let's face it, is a hallmark of Star Wars, then do it the old-fashioned way, in the air. Either that or do what Babylon 5 did and learn about Newtonian physics. The Force Awakens has, of course, rendered over 30 years' worth of expanded universe fiction non-canon, just like that. This will no doubt enrage many fans of said fiction. However, Kevin J. Anderson did note in the foreword of Dark Empire, when you read Dark Empire or any other novels, remember that although Lucasfilm has approved them, these are our sequels, not George Lucas's. If Lucasfilm ever makes films that take place after Return of the Jedi, they will be George Lucas's own creations, probably with no connection to anything we have written. This was, of course, back in 1992, before there was any talk of Disney buying the rights, but the point still stands. Personally, I was never as worried that Disney would make a pig's ear of Star Wars as some fans. Disney have been making live-action science fiction movies for years, notably one of my favourite movies, The Black Hole, made in 1979, the same year as The Empire Strikes Back. Disney were also responsible for Tron. All in all, I enjoyed The Force Awakens, and I'm looking forward to the next movie. Over the next few weeks, we shall see critics slamming Episode 7 for retreading old ground, or for not tessellating with expanded universe fiction, or their own personal fan fiction. But I've come to the conclusion that with Star Wars being a franchise that has existed for as long as it has, and having garnered as diverse a fan base as it has, it would be nothing short of impossible to please everyone. So those at the helm should just get on with making the movies. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think.